After several months of sliding, President Biden's approval rating appears to be on the rise. It now stands at 45%. In a recent survey from CBS taken between August 24th and 26th among registered voters, Biden's numbers are now 3 points higher than they were in July. That's on the approval side. The president's appraisal of handling the economy, gas prices, and inflation also saw figures rise at least 5% in each of those categories, this over the last month. For more on this, CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us now. Okay, significant or not, we should note that these are better numbers for the president, but he's still underwater.
Well, 70-something days from the midterm election, the White House is certainly welcoming numbers like these. And what's interesting is the numbers that we saw, particularly among women and on the issues. So we're seeing that abortion is something that's really driving voters, independents and those in the suburbs. We saw an uptick among about 7 points among white college-educated women. So this shows a little bit of Democrats kind of coming home to Biden in the closing months of the campaign, but also abortion as a driver among key voters. We also saw in this poll that a majority of voters were saying that gas prices were coming down, so people may be feeling a little bit better about the economy. But really, these numbers on abortion are key drivers, at least at this point. And talking to Democrats and Republicans, both sides are acknowledging that this certainly is a factor that they have to contend with. And Republicans are trying to focus on the economy because of that. And Democrats are trying to think of the ways to really keep and capture this momentum that they see right now.
And of course, one of the things that's grabbed headlines, not just here in Washington, Caitlin, but across the country, the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. And our CBS News Battleground Tracker shows just how politically split the country is over that FBI attempt to retrieve documents, some of them classified, from former president's private residence. That is to say, President Trump. Look at this. 85% of registered Democrats say they believe this search was designed to protect national security. Meanwhile, 80% of registered Republicans see it as something deeply political, meaning this is a politicized Justice Department doing something to former President Trump. Caitlin, is that consistent with what you've heard from Republicans and Democrats in Congress?
It is. It's kind of the line of messaging that we've been hearing from Republicans and Democrats in Congress. However, there's been a little bit of a divide. On the House side, you certainly see Republicans rank and file, but also leadership coalescing around the former president on this, echoing his rhetoric and vowing to investigate the Department of Justice and the FBI if they are to take power. Republicans on the Senate side are looking at a little bit of a different dynamic. We've heard Mitch McConnell say that it's kind of a 50-50 split whether Republicans take control of the Senate. He's been a little bit more negative than the House projections. And that's because in some of these key races, candidates really matter. We see that reflected in our poll. And we also see that the former president talking about him and kind of his factoring into this midterm election could be a drag on Republicans, especially since you showed the breakdown of the numbers among Democrats and Republicans on this issue, but among independent voters, they are siding on where Democrats are, saying that this is an issue of national security. So if you're looking at the Senate map, you're looking at those voters that you need to attract. So on one hand, Republicans know that Donald Trump, of course, rallies the base. There still is a question about whether he can turn out voters when he's not on the ticket. But they're also very conscious of independent voters and those swing voters that they need to attract in these midterm elections in some of these key races, especially on the Senate side.
So, Caitlin, the next election immediately before us is the midterm, but everyone knows that the presidential campaign begins right after the midterm election ends. So let's talk about that a little bit. A recent USA Today poll shed some light on who both parties won at the top of the ticket in 2024. 59% of Republican voters, according to that survey, believe that Donald Trump should be the next nominee for the Republican Party, whereas 44% of Democrats want Biden to be the next nominee. What can we deduce from that?
Well, for Republicans, Trump has been not only popular, but also someone who is, to whom the base is really endeared. For Democrats, Biden hasn't been that figure. He hasn't been that person that, really, has rallied the troops. He hasn't been particularly popular, covering his campaign. A lot of Democratic voters saw him as kind of an ends to a means, which was to get rid of Donald Trump. And that's kind of what he really seized on in a lot of ways. So he hasn't really been that figure among Democrats who is, especially exciting to them. And there are questions about whether he'll run again. But what's interesting here and something to look at are what are the coalitions that are formed after this election that will kind of inform whether certain Republicans run, whether they see Trump as a factor, and what are the margins. If Republicans take over everything, that's a different question. But in some of these key races, if they aren't able to win, there will be a lot of questions about Trump's dynamic.
No doubt. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thanks so much.